It's no secret that I love YNAB. I've been using YNAB for over 10 years now. It's seen me through living in different countries, tracking multiple currencies, including simultaneously tracking budgets in both US dollars and Chinese renminbi, different life situations, previously married and now single, when my kids were little and now they're teenagers, and through wildly varying income levels due to all of these life changes. And in each and every one of those past 10 years, it has helped provide me with the peace of mind that my money is being spent, and of course saved, toward the things that I value most. While YNAB has changed a lot over the last 10 years, I mean, the online version didn't even exist when I first started using it. The underlying principle hasn't changed at all. The core tenet of YNAB is and has always been to give every dollar a job. It's simply about being intentional with your money. I get a lot of questions about YNAB, so in this video, I want to show you how I currently use YNAB to manage my budget. I've kept the overall plan structure the same as my actual YNAB budget, but I have changed some of the amounts just for privacy reasons. For reference, I'm a single mom with 3 kids and a 50-50 parenting schedule. I currently rent a home in the Phoenix metro area, and so my categories reflect this situation. I was going to go over both my YNAB plan and my full account setup in this video, but it ended up becoming too long, probably because I like talking about YNAB too much, so I'll cover that in an additional video. Let's start with a grand tour of my YNAB plan. My YNAB plan is where I answer the questions: where do I want my money to go? And then where did my money go? And then also, how much money do I currently have set aside so far for whatever fill in the blank awesome thing that I'm saving for, which is a lot of times travel related. So I personally like to organize my categories by topic. There are definitely other ways of doing this. So some people like to see their expenses by time frame, such as weekly, monthly, and non-monthly spending. Others like to organize it by fixed versus variable expenses. But personally, my focus is on aligning my spending with my overall values, so I feel like this is just the best way to organize it for me. I'm going to expand these so we can go through the various categories. First is investment contributions. My main investment contributions right now are to an HSA account and a Roth IRA. My goals and dreams category group is where I put my holiday expenses and my travel expenses. I do separate my family travel from solo trips that I take. And then I also have a brokerage opportunity fund, which is where I basically have kind of a holding category, and I keep an amount of money for like when things come up, such as if the stock market dips, I can buy in there, or if I have family members who need extra help, just things like that. My emergency fund is the main category I have in the preparedness and replacement funds group. If I did own a home or I had an older car that needed to be replaced soon, I would definitely have some additional categories here. And then next I have a holding category where I save up 1 month of expenses by the beginning of the next month. I prefer to do this versus budgeting months ahead in YNAB, which is obviously a completely acceptable way to do it. But I feel like this just makes my process much easier to have the money sitting there, and then at the beginning of the next month I can just budget it all at once. My giving category, I do separate deductible charitable contributions like those to nonprofits and to public schools from non-deductible charitable contributions, which would be things like GoFundMe or to individuals directly. I haven't needed to use these income tax payments categories in quite a while. As you might expect from a CPA, I do keep a pretty close watch on my estimated taxes throughout the year, so I do keep them there just in case something comes up. My housing categories are pretty straightforward. So my big expenses here are rent. Sadly, my rent is actually higher than this example, and then electricity. Water can also be a little bit expensive living in Arizona, and I do have a pool where I'm living. I don't currently have a car payment, so my big expense in transportation is auto insurance. I actually still have my annual premium amount from last year in here, and at some point, unfortunately, I'm going to have to face the reality of both of my older kids just getting their learning permits. So when they're fully licensed, I'll have to actually add them onto my insurance, and that I'm sure will be significantly higher. And then the rest are just basic things: auto maintenance and repairs, my annual registration, parking fees, and then my monthly car wash subscription, which really is an essential expense because I have a black car in the desert. And then, despite having a 50-50 parenting schedule, I still seem to spend a ridiculous amount on food. In addition to groceries and eating out, I do separate my eating out into restaurants and takeout and coffee shops, which is generally more business or work related. I have a meal kit subscription. I get that every other week when my kids are at my house, and they demand to be fed dinner every single night. My medical category group is higher than I would like, but such is life, I guess. I have a monthly fee I pay to my naturopath doctor who I see regularly, and then because I'm self-employed, I have the joy of personally paying for health insurance. And that's actually higher than that, even just for myself this year. And then there's the regular dental, vision, prescriptions, and vitamins and supplements. These I separate because they do end up being a fairly substantial cost each month. This past year really wasn't great health-wise, but I am going into 2026 feeling much better than I have probably in years. So I'm hopeful I won't need to add too much to these categories. Personal care includes a weekly allowance for my kids. I give them each half their age per week as an allowance. I have books and puzzles because it encourages me to spend this guilt-free, and it just makes me happy. Clothing with separate categories for me and the kids, because sometimes I tend to overspend on my share of the clothing expenses when I have them combined. And then my monthly gym membership, probably the best value in my entire budget. And then hair, beauty, and other personal subscriptions. I did previously have a separate category group for all my subscriptions that I put together, but because they're just such a big part of life now, I wanted to start organizing them by topic. Now, recreation and entertainment. My oldest daughter loves theater, so instead of taking her on a senior trip, which was our previous plan, she asked if we could just go see some more plays, and we've already been to one this year, which was pretty fun. I also have a category for movies, streaming subscriptions like Netflix, Apple TV, Disney, the billion probably that I have. And then my current hobby is woodworking, so I have a separate category for that. I bought myself a miter saw, a circular saw, a jigsaw, and then some just other basic tools last Christmas, and I have not cut off any figures yet, so far so good. For pet care and supplies, I have one cat who we rescued from the streets of Shanghai, and he is very low maintenance. He basically just needs some food and some litter, and both of those things are pretty cheap. And then fortunately, the only times that he's needed to go to the vet are to get his shots to come back to the US. That's a whole nother story that involves sneaking him past some Chinese guards during a COVID lockdown. And then when he got neutered. I do keep some money in a vet category for peace of mind, though, just in case he ever does need to go to the vet. My insurance categories are pretty basic. I have categories for life, long-term disability, and umbrella insurance. Miscellaneous includes the categories that just don't really fit in the other groups. Here I have my annual credit card fee, gifts and birthday parties, because previously I had a gift category, but the parties were the things that were actually really expensive and I just wasn't properly planning for. Then there's miscellaneous expenses and then various subscriptions. So here the subscriptions I include are things like iCloud storage and Dropbox. I also have professional fees, tech and electronic replacement. That's a new category I just added this year. And then shared kids expenses. My ex and I have a joint account where we just both deposit money to pay for kid-related expenses, and so that's where that comes out of. And then the last is the credit card payments. These are set up by YNAB by default. I don't need to regularly assign any money there. YNAB is just automatically keeping track in the background of my budget. There are amounts here only because this just started in January, and so that was the beginning balances in the sample plan. Among these 15 category groups, there are a total of 63 individual categories. And then I do have some income category groups as well, and I'll get to those later. Each of these category groups that I do choose to include in my plan, though, they're very intentional and each one serves a pretty specific purpose for me. So I wanted to give you a few explanations of the reasoning behind my category choices. First, I separate tax-related items just to make it easier when I file my tax returns. This is why I separate my charitable contributions between deductible and non-deductible, and then keeping things like my HSA contributions separate. Second, I like to break things out into more detail when I tend to overspend in that area. So for example, separating my food into groceries, eating out, restaurants, takeout, eating out, coffee shops, which is often more work-related, and then the meal kits. When I do need to move money, I do try to move them within that same category group. So if I overspend on my eating out, I try to take it from like the grocery or the other food categories, at least when possible. Third, I try not to have categories that are too specific and would require me to split out like a ton of transactions. So any household items like toilet paper, cleaning products, those are just included in my groceries category. And then last, I even encourage myself to spend guilt-free on things I enjoy. So in my budget, these are books and puzzles in my woodworking category. So by separating them, I know I have that money there, and when I want to spend money on it, I don't really think twice. The ordering of my categories is also intentional. So paying myself first is at the top of the list, and my goals and dreams categories. Preparedness is also super important to me. One of my top values is security when it comes to money. So I have that next, and then starting down with my housing category group, they're roughly in order of how much spending that group represents. Looking at targets, I have targets on each expense category, and I almost exclusively just use the set-aside target type instead of the refill up to. Most of my targets are monthly or annual set-aside targets. There's just a few categories I think that I set up as weekly set-aside categories. Some of these are my groceries, eating out restaurants, and allowances for my kids. For unpredictable expenses such as my emergency fund, auto repairs, and vet expenses, I use the have a balance of target, and I try to just keep a set amount funded at all times for peace of mind. So when I do need to pull from these categories, I make sure that I refill them as soon as I can. And then in addition to these spending categories, I also track my income in detailed categories in YNAB. If you use YNAB, you know that the standard method that's taught is to use the inflow ready to assign category for all incoming funds. This ready to assign category isn't specifically shown in a separate budget category in YNAB, but these funds go up to the box at the top of your plan, and then you can assign them to your various spending categories. The way I choose to do this, and it still follows the YNAB method, I do not add any of my income in my plan until it's actually received in my bank accounts. This, of course, is the core of YNAB, only assigning your money you currently have, not your future money. But by having this level of detailed income in my plan, I just feel like I have a more complete picture of my varying income sources, and then I can split out my payroll-related tax withholding and my payroll deductions, mostly for tax planning purposes. It's the accountant in me, I think, that just needs to see the nitty-gritty details. It definitely might not work for everyone, and I want to give you a few quick caveats. If you do decide to use income categories, it does add an additional step. When you receive that income, you need to put a negative amount in the assigned column, and that will pull the money into this ready to assign box, just like it would have if you had assigned it to ready to assign, and then it allows you to assign them to these other spending categories. I personally do find it worth it to have this detail, and I'm fine with doing a couple simple steps. I also want to note I don't include any targets for any of my income-related categories since they're not factored into my plan anywhere until the money is actually received. Unlike these expense items, which are funded ahead of time. Usually I fund them all at the beginning of the month. So for my income categories, I have a salaries and wages category group. This is what I pay myself for my business, which is an S corporation. Then I have other income sources in a separate category group. First, I have distributions from my business. This is separate from what I pay myself as a salary. I have categories for investment income, including interest and dividend income, and then stock sale proceeds. I do track the cash values of my brokerage account, and I'll go through that in my separate video. I like to track my credit card rewards. This is definitely an extra thing. I just like to see the little bit of money in there. It's usually money I just use on frivolous things, so it's kind of fun to just have that money sitting there. And then I have some child support income as a divorcee, other miscellaneous income where I will probably put my lottery winnings. I don't currently ever play the lottery, so TBD. Then there's tax refunds, and then there's this additional reimbursements category. The last thing I want to show you on the plan side of YNAB is focused views. This is a somewhat newer YNAB feature, I think, and I really love it. I have my plan, of course, set up by financial topic, but I've created my focused views based on the timing of my expenses. This helps me to just see how much of my expenses are like day-to-day expenses. Those tend to be more variable and discretionary versus my monthly fixed and my non-monthly fixed. And then I especially like having this unpredictable expense view. This helps me to kind of see what my emergency fund savings is made up of. In addition to this emergency fund savings account, I kind of also include like the auto repairs, major medical expenses, and these vet fees as part of a total view of my emergency fund. And I also ensure that I'm always a month ahead on my expenses, so that's kind of an extra month of emergency savings. And that's it, my complete YNAB plan. I can track where my money went in the past, and I can easily customize all of this so that I can make it my own. If you want a master list of budget categories that my budget is based off and you can adapt to your own personal situation, you can find that in the video description. And I'd love to know how you set up your YNAB plan for the year in the comments below.